next like to introduce Kurt Paterson. Kurt has a PhD and has been on the environmental engineering faculty at Michigan Technological University since 1993, where he currently serves as co-director of the D80 Center. The D80 Center has completed more than 400 engineering projects in 25 developing countries over the past 10 years. His personal interests include environmental public health, engineering and social justice, and how people learn. He is co-author of 2 books on sustainable engineering to be published this year. He is also a member of the Rotary Club of Houghton in District 6220, and he will present this afternoon on Engineers Without Borders. Kurt?
How are we now? Okay. Technophile, maybe self-absorbed, and I'm afraid to say maybe nerdy, right? But I'm here to tell you that that model is a little bit antiquated. There's a new breed of engineer roaming the world, and it's about exact opposite of what I just described. And those engineers are coming about because of groups like Engineers Without Borders, and that's what I'd like to share with you today. The mission of EWB, Engineers Without Borders, is twofold, and you can see it here. One is along the same lines of everything we've heard about so far, developing sustainable solutions with communities that we're partnering with around the world. But there's a second agenda as well, and that is to sort of change those engineering students and professionals. I'll offer that there's actually another benefit to all this. At Michigan Tech in our programs, we have this saying that goes something like this: if you don't go, you don't know. When you engage in this type of activity, you come back a different person. And so what's happening across the nation in EWB USA is you're creating this new generation of engineers. Fundamentally different. Let me give you a bit of a history. This all started with a vision of 3 people: Dr. Bernard Amadei at University of Colorado Boulder, and 2 students back in 2001, one project in Belize. And it came about rather accidentally. What's happened since then has been nothing short of phenomenal. And in fact, this might be a phenomena that right now shows no signs of letting up. Here's where we're at in 2007. We've executed 253 projects in EWB USA in 43 countries. There's 10,000 members now. The growth rate, if you do the numbers, is in membership 50% per year over the past few years. I know more than a few organizations that would love to have that as a problem. You can see the growth rate and the projected growth rate in both projects and number of chapters. EWB is set up with chapters at universities and professionally. About 2/3 of the chapters are university chapters. Another interesting thing that's taking place with this phenomena, and that is this difference in appearance in this engineering organization. The second bullet point in particular, these chapters almost across the board are comprised of roughly half women, half men. If you're at all involved in engineering, you know this is a bit unusual. I can tell you at Michigan Tech, where I'm a professor, our chapter has about 51% women. Michigan Tech, our student body, is 24% women. And there's many disciplines well outside of engineering. This is something that's growing well beyond the name of the organization, and that's encouraging to see. Right now, we're working collectively in 100 communities around the world. A typical project, which is how the magic happens, it's got about 12 to 15 people on a team. As I'll show you in a bit, there's this definite rhythm of every project. So there's a travel team involved, and it's typically a bit smaller. You can see the average cost here. Yes, programs are critical to solving these problems. There's still desperate need for individual projects. And clearly there's something really valuable happening here, something that you cannot duplicate in the classroom. This is a new type of education I'm proud to be involved in. Here's the engineer's quick model of what a project might be like in terms of its flow. The project timeline down here, the couple points I wanted to mention was almost all these start with somebody's great idea. And they're exclusively coming from the communities that we're partnering with. It's not a student who comes up with a great idea to help somebody else out. Somehow that idea gets communicated to a chapter and the research is on to form partnerships up front, make sure that you're working with people that you can trust, try to develop those relationships as best as you can. And then the second point here is that there's several review steps by EWB USA. This is not just groups of people coming up with solutions. There's actually external review bodies of professional engineers who review the project along its path. And then travel points. Up front to assess the situation, collect preliminary data, move on to an implementation stage where you might get into the construction if that's part of the project. And then we've heard about this post-assessment, absolutely critical to keep in contact with the community. And I should mention that the goal here is to develop long-term relationships with communities, not just one-off projects, but to run with a community for a decade or more. Here's where we've been so far, not unlike some of the maps we've seen so far today. Here are the project types. Now we've heard a lot about water, and this is one of EWB's strengths. And certainly among students, this is one area that they are very fascinated in trying to help. Some of that is potable water, some agricultural. But clearly, there's other foundational technologies, infrastructure that need to be created in most of these communities. And so you can see some of the other projects that we haven't heard much about yet today. Buildings, transportation networks, energy, information. And that's up to the community to prioritize what they want. I mention this not to give Dr. Amadei more credit. He's a very humble guy. But I wanted to actually make a point of how quickly this can change, and there's a connection to Rotary. I remember going to a meeting about 5 years or so ago. Dr. Amadei was talking about Engineers Without Borders, very much in its infancy then. It was mostly academics, so we can blame them for the following comment. I was looking around. There was a lot of people just kind of shaking their head, like, what is this guy talking about? Engineers doing this kind of stuff? Students doing this kind of stuff? That was about 5 years ago. Now, it's good to see some of these top awards going to Dr. Amadei for his vision, for his genius. I don't think he even forecast the amazing response, particularly among students, but young professionals as well. I mention this because I guess when the Gates Foundation wants to talk to you, it suggests that they're somewhat interested in your work as well. At our national conference in March, Bill Gates Sr. will be talking as a keynote. And the big programs are beginning to form in EWB as well. But the individual projects will continue as one of the strengths. Some other things, the points here are the latter two in particular, although I mentioned the first one. It wasn't up until this year that we had a full-time executive director, Kathy Leslie, who asked me to do this talk for EWB. She has been essentially running 2 full-time jobs for the past many years. And she's now moving into the ED position full-time. I think that'll be a sustainable future for her. It's tough to have 100-hour work weeks routinely. The latter 2 points, so, are if this kind of activity is hitting the mainstream media, it suggests, I think, some hope to have about our society, and that average, typical, everyday people want to hear these stories, want to know about this stuff. There might be some reason for hope. All right, so where do we go from here? There's actually a bit more we can do. Well, clearly all the partnership talk is right on the money. I don't know that we're going to solve some of these problems we talked about today, to be honest. They're huge. But I do know for sure that there's 0 chance of doing it if we're trying to do it individually. Only through partnership do we have any chance. So going forward, we want, you can see here, 1/3 of our Professional members will have been former student members. And I think that'll happen. In fact, coincidentally, I met two of my former students at this conference during the first break. Didn't know they were coming at all. They're now professionals downstate Michigan. They wandered over. They were involved in EWB a few years ago. You can see we want to have this grow outside of engineering even more. It's absolutely necessary. We'll continue to focus on water and sanitation. Develop chapters at every engineering school. We have 160 university chapters right now. There's a few more engineering schools out there to hit. And then professional chapters in every city. There's a fine one over in Detroit here. And the goal here within 5 years is to affect 5 million lives. How do we get there? Well, it's clear, my comments earlier about partnerships, the only way it's going to happen. And so the partnerships here are not unlike what we've heard earlier, but maybe with a few unique wrinkles. We need the students. I'll get back to them in a bit. They're absolutely critical. We need the in-country partners, all those others, donors, NGOs, professionals providing technical oversight and review, educational institutions. This is perhaps one unique component to all this and how it fits in to our universities around the country. And then those professionals, pretty amazing groups. And then there are other partners, one in particular I think of interest here. There is Engineers Without Borders in other countries. Canada has, actually they started before the USA. They are in about 40 countries. And that alliance is loose, but we exchange some knowledge that way. Rotary International, half the projects these days from EWB USA have some kind of partnership, usually financial, with Rotary. And then we haven't heard much about the Peace Corps, but we found them to be excellent partners. So let me just throw out a couple other ways that I think this relationship between EWB and Rotary can proceed. Clearly, combining resources is one way. I have had some good conversations with people. Clearly, Rotary has skills and resources that EWB, particularly the university chapters, do not. Financial, wisdom, whatever you want to call it. And the students provide something unique to that mix. But I want to mention another way that might not be apparent, and that is the mentoring route. The student chapters in particular, they gain so much by partnering with people that have experience, whether it be in NGOs, whether it be consulting firms, all the groups we've heard here from today, excellent partners to these young, eager minds that want to engage in this type of work. Here's another one. As a Rotarian, I've come to learn that this is a bit of a challenge. That is, how do we get new members in the future? Most college students don't know much about Rotary. But I can guarantee you they would know quite a bit if they were partnering with a Rotary group on one of these types of projects. That might be the instant buying and marketing for Rotary. And then there's this, which was my last point about the students. One thing that keeps me going is to be around at my university a couple hundred students who are engaged in this type of volunteer work. Keeps you going. And I imagine if you were to engage with that type of crowd, they might impart some of that energy to you as well. It's a rather rewarding relationship. All right, so in summary, we focus on primarily public health and well-being, hopefully through prevention, using appropriate technologies and solutions. We've got a good track record going forward. Strong network, quite nice built-in capacity to understand these problems and potential solutions. Pretty diverse teams, students, professionals, NGOs, organizations. And this rapidly growing pool of volunteers, 10,000 strong and growing at a highly rapid rate. With that, I thank you for your time, and we'll have a chance to talk a little later in the day, I think.